In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold.
Hey everyone, I'm Joe Biden's husband. As you heard tonight, excuse me, you can see why she's the love of my life, the rock of our family. She never gives herself much credit. But the truth is, she's the strongest person I know. She's a backbone like a ramrod, backbone like a ramrod, backbone like a ramrod, ka-ramrod. Income inequity in the history of the United States of America since 1902. And the fact of the matter is, there is plenty of money to go around. The first thing I would do as president was eliminate the president's tax cut.
You've said you would repeal all of Trump's tax cuts. But do you mean just for the wealthy or for the middle class too? Because Trump did give the middle class a tax cut.
Well, Trump gave a middle class tax cut that was negligible. The fact is that what we should be doing is making sure that the wealthy pay their fair share. The way we pay for it is by rolling back unproductive tax cuts. Some of the $2 trillion tax cut the president put through.
The Abracast, occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
Hey everybody, welcome to, I believe, what's going to be the last protest episode, at least for the time being, of the Abracast. I'm your host, John Towers, and all this week we've been kind of countering the nonsense that is being talked about, spread. No one's even watching this thing. Like, I know how it turns out. I'm a few days after you guys are listening to this. I'm recording them a few days in the past. So I know that no one's actually really watching these a few days in the future, perhaps is how I should have said it. No one's actually watching these things, and no one has much good stuff to say about it. But, however, I am a completist. And I also follow up on shit that I say. So I say I'm going to do it, I'm going to fucking do it. So before we finish this thing up, what are we doing here? What are we doing? Well, I can tell you what I'm not doing. I'm not narrating an audio book. I am reading the infamously long John Galt speech from Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. And you're like, what's the difference between an audiobook and someone reading it on their podcast? And the only thing I could say is go buy the audiobook and listen to it, and then come back and listen to me reading the thing. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that I sometimes stutter, mispronounce words. I doubled up on a sentence last episode where I read the same sentence two times in a row. It's just because I'm getting exhausted going through this thing. So, and also I'm stopping to editorialize. This is why it's taken me over 5 hours to get this thing done. I stop and I ponder where Batman fits into the objectivist philosophical model. Or I stop and I talk about this quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson that I once thought was amazing, but now I look back and I have a lot of serious problems with it. If you made it this far, you've heard all of these things, and I don't imagine it's going to stop for this one episode. So, yeah, so that's what we're not doing. We're not narrating an audio book. Also, I'd like to add, again, or still, whatever, that this book, Atlas Shrugged, the author, Ayn Rand, and her philosophy, which is called Objectivism, is all very controversial. A lot of people on the left don't like this. So, if you're like, I'm tired of it already, you can just come back on Sunday, bro. I got you on Sundays. We'll be doing occult, history, conspiracy, and violence on Sundays. But I do reserve the midweek shows to talk about current events or even sometimes politics every once in a while. Or this is where we fit our philosophy episodes into. These are all bonus episodes. You don't need to pay attention to them. You can just thank you for checking in. Don't let the door hit you on the way out, and I'll see you on Sunday. There, that's what I have to say. No harm, no foul. I know I would not be able to, a few years ago, I would not be able to listen to anybody talking about dissecting or discovering philosophy. I just was not interested in it. That's why I name all the philosophical episodes Western Philosophy right up top, so you can make your judgment call and pass if you want. We're on a voyage of discovery here on the Abercast. Okay, enough. I have so much shit to get through tonight, and I gotta get through it because I gotta have a fucking day off before I record the regular episode. So where are we at in this thing? In the book, what are we up to? Where did we last left our hero John Galt in his address to the nation? He has hijacked the nation's radio waves with some kind of science fiction radio transceiver, and he's been talking at length about his philosophy. He's railing against politicians. He's railing against a world that's been taken over by politicians, bureaucrats, middlemen in academia. He's railing against parasites. He's railing against, what does he call them? He calls them a lot of things. The takers, the parasites, the loafers. He's railing against the people that take away from the people who produce things. So let's see, where are we at here? I gotta put my cheaters on. Okay. John Galt continues. Take a look around you, you savages who stutter that ideas are created by men's means of production, that a machine is not the product of human thought, but a mystical power that produces human thinking. You have never discovered the industrial age, and you cling to the morality of the barbarian eras when a miserable form of human sustenance was produced by muscular labor. The muscular labor of slaves. Every mystic has always longed for slaves to protect him from the material reality he dreaded. But you grotesque little activists, stare blindly at the skyscrapers and the smokestacks around you and dream of enslaving the material providers who are scientists, inventors, industrialists, and when you clamor for public ownership of the means of productions, you are clamoring for public ownership of the mind. I have taught my strikers that the answer you deserve is only try and fucking get it. I added the expletive. Miss Rand would never have done so. You proclaim yourself unable to harness the forces of inanimate matter, yet propose to harness the minds of men who are able to achieve the feats that you cannot equal. You proclaim that you cannot survive without us, yet propose to dictate the terms of our survival. You proclaim that you need us, yet indulge in the impertinence of asserting your right to rule us by force. And expect that we, who are not afraid of the physical nature that fills you with terror, will cower at the sight of any lout who has talked you into voting him a chance to command us. You propose to establish a social order based on the following tenets: that you are incompetent to run your own life, but competent to run the lives of others; that you're unfit to exist in freedom, but fit to become an omnipotent ruler; that you are unable to earn your living by the use of your own intelligence, but unable to judge politicians and devote them into jobs of total power over arts you have never seen, over sciences you have never studied, and over achievements of which you have no knowledge, over the gigantic industries where you, by your own definition of your capacity, would be unable successfully to fill the job of an assistant greaser. This idol of your cult of zero worship, this symbol of impotence, this congenital dependent, is your image of man and your standard of value, in whose likeness you strive to refashion your soul. It's only human, you cry in defense of any depravity reaching the stage of self-abasement, where you seek to make the concept human mean a weakling, the fool, the rotter, the liar, the failure, the coward, the fraud, and to exile from the human race the hero, the thinker, the producer, the innovator, the strong, the purposeful, the pure. And as if to feel we're human, but to think we're not. As if to fail were human, but to succeed were not. As if corruption were human, but virtue were not. As if the premise of death were proper to man, but the premise of life were not. In order to deprive us of honor, that you may then deprive us of our wealth. You have always regarded us as slaves who deserve no moral recognition. You praise any venture that claims to be non-profit, and damn the men who made the profits that make the venture possible. You regard as in the public interest any project serving those who do not pay. It is not in the public interest to provide any service to those who do the paying. A public benefit is anything given as alms. To engage in trade is to injure the public. Public welfare is the welfare of those who do not earn it. Those who do are entitled to no welfare. The public to you is whoever has failed to achieve any virtue or value. Whoever achieves it, whoever provides the goods you require for survival, ceases to be regarded as part of the public or as part of the human race. What blank out permitted you to hope you could get away with this muck of contradictions and to plan it as an ideal society when the no of your victims was sufficient to demolish the whole of your structure? What permits any insolent beggar to wave his sores in the face of his betters and to plead for help in the tone of a threat? You cry as he does that you are counting on your pity, but your secret hope is a moral code that has taught you to count on our guilt. If I had a little bell, I would ding, 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 ding. You expect us to feel guilty of our virtues in the presence of your vices, wounds, and failures, guilty of succeeding at existence, guilty of enjoying the life that you damn, yet beg us to help you to live. Did you want to know who is John Galt? I'm the first man of ability who refused to regard it as guilt. I am the first man who would not do penance for my virtues or let them be used as the tools of my destruction. I am the first man who would not suffer martyrdom at the hands of those who wished me perished for the privilege of keeping them alive. I am the first man who told them that I did not need them. And until they learn to deal with me as traitors giving value for value, they would have to exist without me, as I would exist without them. Then I would let them learn whose is the need and whose is the ability. And if human survival is the standard, whose terms would set the way to survive. I have done my plan and intention, what had been done throughout history by silent default. There has always been men of intelligence who went on strike and protest and despair, and they did not know the meaning of their actions. The man who retires from public life to think, but not to share his thoughts. The man who chooses to spend his years in obscurity of menial employment, keeping to himself the fire of his mind and never giving it form, expression, or reality, refusing to bring it into a world he despises. The man who is defeated by revulsion, the man who renounces before he has started, the man who gives up rather than give in, the man who functions at a fraction of his capacity, disarmed by his longing for an ideal he has not found. They are on strike. On strike against unreason, on strike against your world, your values, but not knowing any values of their own. They abandon the quest to know in the darkness of their hopeless indignation, which is righteous without knowledge of the right and passionate without the knowledge of desire. They concede to you the power of reality and surrender the incentives of their mind, and they perish in bitter futility as rebels who never learned the object of their rebellion, as lovers who never discovered their love. The infamous times you call the Dark Ages were an era of intelligence on strike. The men of ability went underground and lived undiscovered, studying in secret, and died, destroying the works of their mind when only a few of the bravest of martyrs remained to keep the human race alive. Every period ruled by mystics was an era of stagnation and want When most men were on strike against existence, working for less than their barest survival, leaving nothing but the scraps to their rulers to loot, refusing to think, to venture, to produce, the ultimate collector of their profits and the final authority on truth or error was the whim of some gilded degenerate sanctioned as superior to reason by defying right by the grace of a club. The road of human history was a string of blank outs over the sterile stretches eroded by faith and force, with only a few brief bursts of sunlight when the released energy of the men of the mind performed the wonders you gaped at, admired, but prominently extinguished again. But there will be no extinction this time. The game of the mystics is up. You will perish in and by your own unreality. We, the men of reason, will survive. I've called out on strike the kind of martyrs who had never deserted you before. I have given them the weapon they had lacked, the knowledge of their own moral values. I have taught them that the world is ours, wherever we choose to claim it by virtue and grace of the fact that ours is the morality of life. They, the great victims who had produced all the wonders of humanity's brief summer, they, the industrialists, the conquerors of martyrs, had not discovered the nature of their right. They had not known that theirs was the power, and I taught them that theirs was the glory. You who dare to regard us as moral inferiors of any mystic who claims supernatural visions, you who scramble like vultures for plundered pennies, yet honor a fortune teller above a fortune maker, you who scorn a business as ignoble, but esteem any postulating artist as exalted. The root of your standards is the mystic miasmia, which comes from a primordial swamp, the cult of death, which pronounces a businessman immoral by reason of the track that he keeps you alive. You who claim that you long to rise above the crude concerns of the body before the drudgery of serving mere physical needs. You who is enslaved by physical needs, the Hindu who labors from sunrise to sunset as the shaft of the hand plow for a bowl of rice, or the American who is driving a tractor, who is the conqueror of physical reality, the man who sleeps on a bed of nails, or the man who sleeps of the inner spring mattress. Which is the monument of the triumph of the human spirit over matter. The germ-eaten hovels on the shorelines of the Ganges or the Atlantic skyline of New York City. Unless you learn the answers of these questions, to learn to stand at reverent attention when you face the achievements of man's mind, you will not stay much longer on this earth, which we love and will not permit you to damn. You will not sneak by with the rest of your lifespan. I have foreshortened the usual course of history, and I've let you discover the nature of the payment you had hoped to switch to the shoulders of others. It is the last of your own living power that will now be drained to provide the unearned for the worshippers and the carriers of death. Do not pretend that malevolent reality defeated you. You were defeated by your own evasions. Do not pretend that you will perish for a noble idea. You will perish as fodder for the haters of man. But to those of you who still retain a remnant of dignity and a will to love one's life, I am offering the chance of a second choice. Choose whether you wish to perish for the morality you have never believed or practiced. Pause on the brink of self-destruction and examine your values and your life. You had known how to take an inventory of your wealth, and now you take an inventory of your mind. Since childhood, you have been hiding the guilty secret that you feel no desire to be moral, no desire to seek self-immolation, that you dread and hate your code, but dare to say it even to yourself, that you're devoid of these moral instincts which others profess to feel. The less you felt, the louder you proclaimed your selfless love and servitude to others, in dread of ever letting them discover your own self, the self that you betrayed, the self that you kept in concealment like a skeleton in the closet of your body. And they were at once your dupes and your deceivers. They listened and voiced their loud approval and dread, and ever letting you discover that they were harboring the same unspoken secret existence among you in a giant pretense, an act you all perform for one another, each feeling that he is the only guilty freak, which placing his moral authority to the unknowable known only to others, each making the reality he feels they expect him to fake, none having the courage to break the vicious circle. No matter what dishonorable compromise you've made with your impractical creed, no matter what miserable balance, half cynicism, half superstition you now manage to maintain, you still preserve the root, the lethal tenet. You believe that the moral and the practical are opposite. Since childhood, you have been running from the terror of choice. You have never dared fully to identify. If the practical, whatever you must practice to exist, whatever works, succeeds, achieves your purpose, whatever brings you food and joy, whatever profits you, is evil. And if the good is moral, is the impractical, whatever fails, destroys, frustrates, whatever injures you and brings you loss and pain, when your choice is to be moral or to live. The sole result of your murderous doctrine was to remove morality from life. You grew up to believe that moral laws bear no relation to the job of living except as an impediment, and the threat that man's existence is a amoral jungle where anything goes and anything works. It is a fog of switching definitions which descend upon the frozen mind. You've forgotten that evils damned by your creed were the virtues required for living. You've come to believe the actual evils are the practical means of our existence, forgetting that the impractical good was self-sacrifice. You believe that self-esteem is impractical, forgetting that the practical evil was production. You believe that robbery is practical, swinging like a helpless branch in the wind of an uncharted moral wilderness. You dare not fully to be evil or fully to live. Where you are honest, you feel the resentment of a sucker. When you cheat, you feel terror and shame, and when you are happy, your joy is diluted by guilt. When you suffer, your pain is augmented by the feeling that pain is your natural state. Your pity the men you admire, you believe they are doomed to fail. You envy the men that you hate. You believe that they are masters of existence, and you are a struggling remnant of rational honesty. In the twisted bewilderment minds of your children, you declare that you can offer no rational argument to support the ideas that created this country. That there is no rational justification for freedom, for property, for justice, for rights, that they rest on a mystical insight that can be accepted only on faith. That in reason and logic the enemy is right, but faith is superior to reason. You declare that you declare to your children that it is rational to loot, to torture, to enslave, to expropriate, to murder, but that they must resist temptations of logic and stick to the discipline of remaining irrational. That skyscrapers, factories, radios, airplanes were all the product of faith, that mystic intuition, while famine, concentration camps, and firing squads are the product of a reasonable manner of existence. That the Industrial Revolution was a revolt of the men of faith against the era of reason. Logic, which is known as the Middle Ages, simultaneously is the same breath to the same child. You declare that the looters who rule the people's states will surpass this country in material production, since they are the representatives of science, and that it's evil to be concerned with physical wealth, and that one must renounce material prosperity. You declare that the looters' ideals are noble, but that they do not mean them while you do. That your purpose in fighting the looters is only to accomplish their aims, which they cannot accomplish, but you can. And that the way to fight them is to beat them to it and give one's wealth away. Then you wonder why your children join the people's thugs or become half-crazed delinquents. You wonder why the looters' conquest keeps creeping closer to your doors, and you blame it on the human stupidity, declaring the masses are impervious to reason. You blank out the open public spectacle of the looters' fight against the mind, and the fact that their bloodiest horrors are unleashed to punish the crime of thinking. You blank out the fact that most mystics of muscle started out as the mystics of spirit, and that they keep switching from one to the other. That the men you call materialists and spiritualists are only two halves of the same dissected human, forever seeking completion, but seeking it by swinging from the destruction of the flesh to the destruction of the soul, and vice versa. That they keep running from your colleges to the slave pens of Europe, in an open collapse into the mystic muck of India, seeking any refuge against the reality, any form of escape from the mind.
Learn more at abracast.com. Get bonus content by signing up for the mailing list. Get all that, plus many exclusive episodes by supporting the show at patreon.com or subscribestar.com.
You blanket out and cling to your hypocrisy of faith in order to blank out the knowledge that the looters have a stranglehold upon you, which consists of your moral code. That the looters are the final and consistent practitioners of the morality. You're half obeying, half evading, that they practice it only the only way it can be practiced, by turning the earth into a sacrificial furnace, that your morality forbids you to oppose them, and the only way they can be opposed, by refusing to become a sacrificial animal and proudly asserting your right to exist. that in order to fight them, you have to finish. And with full rectitude, it is your morality that you have to reject. You blank it out because your self-esteem is tied to mystic unselfishness, which you have never possessed or practiced and spent so many years pretending to possess that, although the denouncing it fills you with terror. No value is higher than self-esteem, but you've invested it in counterfeit securities, and now your morality has caught you in a trap where you are forced to protect your self-esteem by fighting for the creed of self-destruction. The grim joke is on you. That need of self-esteem, which you are unable to explain or define, belongs to my morality, not yours. It's the objective token of my code. It is my proof within your own soul. By a feeling he has not learned to identify, but has derived from his first awareness of existence, from his discovery that he has to make choices. Man knows that his desperate need for self-esteem is a matter of life or death. As a being of volitional consciousness, he knows that he must know his own value in order to maintain his own life. He knows that he has to be right. To be wrong in action means a danger to his life. To be wrong in person, to be evil, means to be unfit for existence. Every act of a man's life has to be willed. To mere act of obtaining or eating his food implies that the person he perceives is worthy of being preserved. Every pleasure he seeks to enjoy implies that the person who seeks it is worthy of finding enjoyment. He has no choice about his need of self-esteem. His only choice is the standard by which to gauge it. And he makes this fatal error when he switches the gauge protecting his life into the service of his own destruction. When he chooses a standard contradicting existence and sees his self-esteem against reality. Every form of causeless self-doubt, every feeling of inferiority and secret unworthiness is, in fact, man's hidden dread of his inability to deal with existence. But the greater of his terror is more... but the greater terror, the more fiercely he clings to his murderous doctrines that choke him. No man can survive the moment of pronouncing himself irredeemably evil. Should he do it, his next moment is insanity or suicide. To escape it, if he's chosen an irrational standard, he will fake, evade, blank out. He will cheat himself of reality, of existence, of happiness, of mind. And he will ultimately cheat himself of self-esteem by struggling to preserve its illusion rather than to risk discovering its lack. To fear, to face an illusion is to believe that the worst is true. It is not any crime you have ever committed that infects your soul with permanent guilt. It is none of your failures, errors, or flaws, but the blank out by which you attempt to evade them. It is not any sort of original sin or unknown parental deficiency, but the knowledge of the fact of your basic default, of suspending your mind, of refusing to think, fear and guilt of your chronic emotions. They are real, and you do deserve them, but they don't come from the superficial reason you invest to disguise their cause, not from your selfishness, weakness, or ignorance, but from a real and basic threat to your existence. Fear, because you have abandoned your weapon of survival. Guilt, because you have done it volitionally. The self you have betrayed is your mind. Self-esteem is reliance on one's power to think. The ego you seek, the essential you, which you cannot express or define. It is your emotions to inarticulate dreams, but your intellect, that judge of your supreme tribunal whom you've impeached in order to drift at the mercy of any stray shyster. You describe as your feeling, and then you drag yourself through the self-made night in a desperate quest for a nameless fire, moved by some fading vision of a dawn you had seen and lost. Observe the persistence in mankind's mythologies of a legend about a paradise that men once possessed, the city of Atlantis, the Garden of Eden, some kingdom of perfection always behind us. The root of the great legend exists not in the past of the race, but in the past of every man. You still retain a sense, not as firm as a memory, but as diffuse, like a pain of hopeless longing, that somewhere in the starting years of your childhood, before you learned to submit, to absorb the terror of unreason, and to doubt the value of your mind, you had known a radiant state of existence. You had known the independence of the rational consciousness facing an open universe. That is the paradise which you have lost, which you seek, which is yours for the taking. Some of you will never know who is John Galt, but those of you who have known a single moment of love for existence and a pride of being its worthy lover, a moment looking at the earth and letting your glance be its sanction, have known the state of being a man, and I am only the man who knew what the state is not to be betrayed. I am a man who knew what made it possible, and who chose consistently to practice and to be what you had practiced and been in that one moment. The choice is yours to make. The choice is the dedication to one's highest potential is made by accepting the fact that this noblest act you have ever performed is the act of your mind and the process of grasping that 2 and 2 make 4. Whoever you are, you who are alone in my words, is this movement with nothing but your honesty to help you understand. The choice is still open to be a human being, but the price is to start from scratch and to stand naked in the face of reality and reversing a costly historical error and declare, I am, therefore I'll think. Accept this irrevocable fact that your life depends on your mind. Admit that the whole of your struggle, the doubts of your fakes, your evasions, was a desperate quest to escape from that responsibility of a volitional consciousness, a quest for an automatic knowledge, for an instant action, for intuitive certainty, and while you called it a longing for the state of an angel, what you were seeking was the state of an animal. Accept as your moral idea the task of becoming a man. Do not say that you are afraid to trust your mind because you know so little. You are safer in surrendering to the mystics, to discarding the little that you know. Live and act with the limit of your knowledge and keep expanding it to the limit of your life, and redeem your mind from the huck shops of authority. Accept the fact that you are not omnipotent. But playing a zombie will not give you omnipotence. that your mind is fallible, but becoming mindless will not make you ineffable, that an error made on your own is safer than 10 truths accepted on faith because the first leaves you the means to correct it. The second destroys your capacity to distinguish truth from error in place of your dream of an omnipotent automation. Accept the fact that any knowledge man acquires is acquired by his own will and effort, and not that his distinction in the universe, that is nature, his morality is glory, and discard that unlimited license to evil, which consists of claiming that man is imperfect. By what standard do you damn him when you claim him? Accept the fact that in the realm of morality, nothing less than perfection will do. But perfection is not to be gauged by mystic commandments, but practice the impossible. And your moral stature is not to be gauged by matter, not open to your choice. Man has a single basic choice, to think or not. And that is the gauge of his virtue. Moral perfection is unbreached rationality, not the degree of your intelligence, but the full and relentless use of your mind, not the extent of your knowledge, but to the acceptance of reason as an absolute.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Send an email or visit us on social media to let us know what you think about this topic. And please remember to leave a 5-star rate and review.
Sorry for the break there. It started to fall apart. I need to regroup a little bit. This book is so big and the letters are so tiny, the little type print. So I apologize, but we're gonna get back. I'm gonna get back on this fucking horse right now. John Galt says, learn to distinguish the difference between errors of knowledge and breaches of morality. An error of knowledge is not a moral flaw, provided you are willing to correct it. Only a mystic would judge human beings by a standard of an impossible, automatic omnipotence. But a breach of morality is the conscious choice of an action you know to be evil, or a willful evasion of knowledge, a suspension of sight and of thought. That which you do not know is not a moral charge against you, but that which you refuse to know. As an account of infamy growing in your soul, make every allowance for errors of knowledge. Do not forgive or accept any breach of morality. Give your benefit of the doubt to those who seek to know, but treat as potential killers those specimens of insolent depravity who make demands upon you, announcing that they have and seek no reasons, proclaiming as a license that they just feel it, or those who reject the irrefutable argument, saying it's only logic, which means it's only reality. The only realm opposed to reality is the realm and premise of death. Accept the fact that achievement is your happiness, is the only moral purpose of your life, and that happiness, not pain or mindless self-indulgence, is the proof of your moral integrity, since it is proof that the result of your loyalty to the achievement of your values. Happiness was the responsibility you dreaded. It required the kind of rational discipline you do not value yourself enough to assume, and the anxious staleness of your days, the monument of your evasion, and the knowledge that there is no moral substitute for happiness, that there is no more despicable coward than the man who deserted the battle for his joy, fearing to assert his right to existence, lacking the courage and the loyalty to life of a bird or a flower, reaching for the sun. Discard the protective rags of that vice which you call a virtue. Humility. Learn to vivre. If man is to live on earth, it is a right for him to use his mind. It is a right to act on his own free judgment. It is a right to work for his values and to keep the product of his work. If life on earth is his purpose, he has right to live as a rational being. Nature forbids him irrational, the irrational. Any group, any gang, any nation that attempts to negate man's right is wrong, which means is evil, which means is anti-life. It's the anti-life equation. Don't tell dark side. Rights are a moral concept, and morality is a matter of choice. Men are free not to choose man's survival as the standard of their morals and their laws, but not free to escape from the fact that the alternative is a cannibal society which exists for a while by devouring its best and collapses like a cancerous body when the healthy have been eaten by the diseased. When the rational have been consumed by the irrational, such has been the fate of your societies in history. But you've evaded the knowledge of the cause, and I am here to state it. The agent of retribution was the law of identity, which you cannot escape. Just as man cannot live by means of the irrational, so two men cannot, or 2,000, or 2 billion. Just as man can't succeed by defying reality, so a nation can't, or a country, or a globe. A is A. The rest is a matter of time, provided by the generosity of victims. Just as a man can't exist without his body, so no right can exist without the right to translate one's right into reality, to think, to work, to keep the results, which means the right of property. The modern mystics of muscle who offer you the fraudulent alternative of human rights versus property rights, as if one could exist without the other, are making a last grotesque attempt to revive the doctrine of soul versus body. Only a ghost can exist without material property. Only a slave can work with no right to the product of his effort. The doctrine that human rights are superior to property rights simply means that some human beings have the right to make property out of others. Since the competent have nothing to gain from the incompetent, it means the right of the incompetent to own their betters and to use them as productive cattle. Whoever regards this as a human and right has no right to the title of human. The source of property rights is the law of causality. All property and all forms of wealth are produced by a man's mind and labor. You cannot have effects without causes, and you cannot have wealth without its source, without intelligence. You cannot force intelligence to work. Those who are able to think will not work under compulsion, and those who will won't produce much more than the price of the whip needed to keep them enslaved. You cannot obtain the products of a mind except on the owner's terms, by trade, and by volitional consent. Any other policy of men towards man's property is a policy of criminals. No matter what their numbers, criminals are savages who play at short range and starve when their prey runs out, just as you are starving today. You who believe that crime could be practical if your government decreed that robbery was legal and resistance to robbery was illegal. Whoop, whoop, defund the police. Whoop, whoop, no justice, no peace. Whoop, whoop. The only the only proper purpose of a government is to protect a man's rights, which means to protect him from physical violence. Whoop, whoop. No justice, no peace. Whoop, whoop. Defund the police. Whoop, whoop. A proper government is only a policeman acting as an agent of man's self-defense, and as such my resort to force only against those who start in use of force. The only proper function of a government are the police to protect you from criminals, the army to protect you from foreign invaders, and the courts to protect your property and contracts from breach or fraud by others, to settle disputes by rational rules according to objective law. But a government that initiates, remember, no man can initiate, the employment of force against men who had forced no one, the employment of an armed compulsion against disarmed victims, is a nightmare, a infernal machine designed to annihilate morality. Such a government reverses its only moral purpose and switches from the role of protector to the role of man's deadliest enemy, from the role of a policeman to the role of a criminal, vested with the right to the wielding of such violence against victims, deprived of the right of self-defense. Such a government substitutes for morality the following rule of social conduct: you may do whatever you please to your neighbor, provide your gang is bigger than his. Whoop, whoop. Defund the police. Whoop, whoop. No justice, no peace. Whoop, whoop. Only a brute, a fool, or an evader can agree to exist on such terms, or agree to give his fellow men a blank check on his life and his mind, to accept the belief that others have the right to dispose of his person and their physical whim, that the will of the majority is omnipotent, and the physical force of muscles and numbers is a substitute for justice. Reality and truth. We, the men of the mind, we who are traders, not masters or slaves, do not deal in blank checks or grant them. We do not live or work with any form of the non-objective. So long as men in the era of savagery had no concept of objective reality and believed that physical nature was ruled by the whim of unknowable demons, no thought, no science, no production were possible. Only when men discovered that nature was a firm, predictable absolute were they able to rely on their knowledge, to choose their course and their plan and their future, and slowly to rise from the cave. Now you have placed modern industry with its immense complexity of scientific precision back into the power of unknowable demons, the unpredictable power of the arbitrary whims of hidden, ugly little bureaucrats. A farmer will not invest his efforts of one summer if he is unable to calculate his chances of a harvest. But you expect industrial giants who plan in terms of decades, invest in terms of generations, and undertake 99-year contracts to continue to function and to produce, not knowing what random caprice in the skull of what random official will descend upon him at the moment to demolish the whole of their efforts. Drifters and physical laborers live and plan by a range of a day. The better the mind, the longer the range. A man whose vision extends to a shanty might continue to build on your quicksands to grab a fast profit and run. A man who envisions skyscrapers will not. Nor will he give 10 years of unswerving devotion to the fact or to the task of inventing a new product when he knows that gangs of the entrenched mediocrity are juggling the laws against him to tie him, restrict him, and force him to fail. But should he fight them and struggle and succeed, they will seize his rewards and his invention. Look past the range of the moment, you who cry that you fear to compete with men of superior intelligence, that their mind is a threat to your livelihood, and that the strong leave no chance to the weak in a market of voluntary trade. What determines the material value of your work? Nothing but the productive effort of your mind. If you lived on a desert island, the less efficient the thinking of your brain, the less your physical labor would bring you. And you could spend your life on a single routine, collecting a precarious harvest or hunting with a bow and arrow, unable to think any further. But when you live in a rational society where men are free to trade and you receive an incalculable bonus, the material value of your work is determined not only by your effort, but by the effort of the best productive minds who exist in the world around you. When you work in a modern factory, you are paid not only for your labor, but for all the productive genius which has made that factory possible. For the work of the industrialist who built it, for the work of the investor who saved the money to risk on the untried and the new, for the work of the engineer who designed the machines of which you are pushing the levers, for the work of the inventor who created the product for which you spend your time on making, the work of the scientist who discovered the laws that went into the making of that product, for the work of the philosopher who taught men how to think, and whom you spend your time denouncing. The machine, the frozen form of a living intelligence, is the power that expands the potential of your life by raising the productivity of your time. If you worked as a blacksmith in the mystics' Middle Ages, the whole of your earning capacity would consist of an iron bar produced by your hands and days of effort. How many tons of rail would you produce per day if you work for Hank Rearden? Hank Rearden was the locomotive entrepreneur. He was the locomotive industrialist in the book, in the story. He invented some kind of super steel or something that they used, and they were able to. It was like strong. It was like the $6 Million Man. It was like stronger and faster and all this stuff. This is where the whole story kind of takes off from, is this invention by Hank about this railroad line. Back to it. I don't know why I stopped to explain that. I haven't stopped to explain much of the actual book. Anyhow, would you dare to claim the size of your paycheck was created solely by your physical labor, and that those rails were the product of your muscles? The standard of living of the blacksmith is all that your muscles are worth, and the rest is a gift from Hank Rearden. Every man is free to rise as far as he is able or willing, but it's only the degree to which he thinks that determines the degree on which he'll rise. Physical labor, as such, can extend no further than the range of the movement. The man who does no more than physical labor consumes the material value equivalent of his own contribution to the process of production, and leaves no further value, either for himself or others. But the man who produces an idea in any field of rational endeavor, the man who discovers new knowledge, is the permanent benefactor of humanity. Material products can't be shared. They belong to some ultimate consumer. It is the value of an idea that can be shared with unlimited numbers of men, making all sharers richer at no one's sacrifice or loss, raising the productive capacity of whatever labor they perform. It is the value of his own time that the strong of the that the strong of the intellect transfers to the weak, letting them work on the jobs he discovered while devoting his time to further discoveries. This is a mutual trade, to mutual advantage. The interests of the mind are one, no matter what the degree of intelligence among men who desire to work and don't seek or expect the unearned. In proportion to the mental energy he spends, the man who creates the new invention receives but a small percentage of his value in terms of material payment. No matter what fortune he makes, no matter what millions he earns, but the man who works as a janitor on the factory producing that invention receives an enormous payment in proportion to the mental effort that his job requires of him. And the same is true of all men between, on all levels of ambition and ability. The man at the top of the intellectual pyramid contributes the most to all those below him, and he gets nothing except his material payment, receiving no intellectual bonus from others to add the value of his time. The man at the bottom, who's left to himself, would starve in a hopeless ineptitude, contributing nothing to those above him, but receives the bonus of all strong and the weak of the intellect. Such is the pattern of exploitation for which you have damned the strong. Such was the service we had given you, and we were glad and willing to give. What did we ask in return? Nothing but freedom. We required that you leave us free to function, free to think, and to work as we choose, free to take on risks and to bear our own losses, free to earn our own profits and to make our own fortunes, free to gamble on your rationality, to submit our products to the judgment for the purpose of voluntary trade, to rely on the objective value of our work and on your mind's ability to see it, free to count on your intelligence and honesty and to deal with nothing but your mind. Such was the price we asked, which you chose to reject as too high. You decide to call it unfair that we who had dragged you out of your hovels and provided you with modern apartments, with radios, movies, and cars, should own our palaces and yachts. You decided that you had the right to your wages, but we had no right to our profits. That you did not want us to deal with your mind, but to deal instead with your gun. Our answer to that was, may you be damned. Our answer came true. You are. You do not care to compete in terms of intelligence. You are now competing in terms of brutality. You do not care you do not care to allow rewards to be won by successful production. You are now running a race in which rewards are won by successful plunder. You call it selfish and cruel that men should trade value for value. You have established an unselfish society where they trade extortion for extortion. Your system is a legal civil war where men gang up on one another and struggle for possession of the law, which they use to club over rivals until another gang wrests it from... I had a sticky page. Wrests it from their clutch and clubs them with it in their turn. All of them clamoring prostitutions of service and unnamed public unspecified goods. You had said that you saw no difference between economic and political power, between the power of money and the power of guns, no difference between reward and punishment, no difference between purchase and plunder, and no difference between pleasure and fear. No difference between life and death. You are learning the difference now. Some of you might plead the excuse of your ignorance of a limited mind and a limited range, but the damned and the guiltiest among you are the men who had the capacity to know, yet chose to blank out reality. The men who were willing to sell their intelligence to cynical servitude to force, the contemptible breed of those mystics of science who profess a devotion to some sort of pure knowledge, the purity consisting of their claim in such knowledge has no practical purpose on this earth to reserve their logic for inanimate matter, but believe that the subject of dealing with men requires and deserves no rationality, who scorn money and sell their souls in exchange for a laboratory supplied by loot. And since there is no such thing as non-practical knowledge, or any sort of disinterested action, since they scorn the use of their science for the purpose and profit of life, they deliver their science to the service of death, to the only practical purpose it can ever have for looters, to inventing weapons of coercion and destruction by the intellects who seek escape from the moral values. They are the damned on this earth. Theirs is the guilt beyond forgiveness. Do you hear me, Dr. Robert Stadler? But it is not to him that I wish to speak. I am speaking to those among you who have retained some sovereign shred of their soul, unsold and unstamped, to the order of others, if in the chaos of the motives they have made you listen to the radio tonight, there was an honest, rational desire to learn what was wrong with the world. You are the man whom I wished to address. By the rules and terms of my code, one owes a rational statement to those whom it does concern, and who are making an effort to know. Those who are making an effort to fail to understand me are not a concern of mine. I am speaking to those who desire to live and to recapture the honor of their soul. Now that you know the truth about your world, stop supporting your own destroyers. The evil of this world is made possible by nothing but the sanction you give it. Withdraw your sanction, withdraw your support, and do not try to live on your enemy's terms or to win at a game where they're setting the rules. Do not seek to favor of those who enslaved you. Do not beg for alms from those who have robbed you, be it subsidies, loans, or jobs. Do not join their team to recoup what they've taken by helping them rob your neighbors. One cannot hope to maintain one's life by accepting bribes to condone one's destruction. Do not struggle for profit, success, or security at the price of a lien on your right to exist. Such a lien is not to be paid off. The more you pay them, the more they will demand, the greater the values you seek or achieve. The more vulnerability helps you become. Theirs is a system of white blackmail devised to bleed you not by means of your sins, but by means of your love for existence. Do not attempt to rise on the looter's terms or to climb a ladder they are holding the ropes. Do not allow their hands to touch the only power that keeps them in power, your living ambition. Go on strike in the manner that I did. Use your mind and your skill in private. Extend your knowledge, develop your ability. But do not share your achievements with others. Do not produce a fortune with a looter riding on your back. Stay on the lowest rung of their ladder. Earn no more than your bare survival. Do not make an extra penny to support the looter state. Since you're captive, act as a captive. Do not help them pretend that you are free. Be silent, incorruptible enemy they dread. When they force you, obey, but do not volunteer. Never volunteer a step in their direction, or a wish, or a plea, or a purpose. Do not help a hold-up man to claim that he acts as your friend and benefactor. Do not help your jailers to pretend that their jail is your natural state of existence. Do not help them fake reality. That fake is only is the only dam holding off the secret terror, the terror of knowledge. They're unfit to exist. Remove it and let them drown. Your sanction is the only life belt. If you find a chance to vanish into some wilderness out there, out of their reach, do so. But do not exist as a bandit or create a gang competing with their rackets. Build a productive life of your own with those who accept your moral code and are willing to struggle for a human existence. You have no chance to win on the morality of death or by the code of faith or force. Raise a standard to which the honest will repair, the standard of life and reason. Act as a rational being and aim at becoming a rallying point for those who are starved for a voice of integrity. Act on your rational values, whether alone in the midst of your enemies, or with a few of your chosen friends, or as a founder of a modern community on the frontier of mankind's rebirth. When the looter's state collapses, deprived of all the best of its slaves, when it falls to a level of impotent chaos like the mystic-ridden nations of the Orient and dissolves into starving robber gangs fighting to rob one another, when the advocates of morality, of sacrificing, perish with their final ideal, then on that day we will return. We will open the gates of our city to those who deserve to enter a city of smokestacks, pipelines, orchards, markets, and inviolable homes. We will act as the rallying center for such hidden outposts as you will build, with the sign of the dollar as our symbol and the sign of free trade and free minds. We will move to reclaim this country once more from the impotent savages who never discovered its nature, its meaning, its splendor. Those who choose to join us will join us, and those who don't will not have the power to stop us. Hordes of savages have never been an obstacle to men who carried the banner of the mind. When this country will once more become a sanctuary for vanishing species, the rational being, the political system we will build is contained in a single moral premise. No man may obtain any values from others by resorting to physical force. Every man will stand or fall, live or die by his rational judgment. If he fails to use it and falls, he will be his only victim. If he fears that his judgment is inadequate, he will not be given a gun to improve it. If he chooses to correct his errors in time, he will have the unobstructed example of his betters for guidance and learning to think. But an end will be put to the infamy of paying with one's life for the errors of others. In that world, you will be able to rise in the morning with the spirit that you had known in your childhood, the spirit of eagerness, adventure, and certainty, which comes from dealing with the rational universe. No child is afraid of nature. It is your fear of men that will vanish. The fear that has stunted your soul, the fear you acquired in your early encounters with the incomprehensible, the unpredictable, the contradictory, the arbitrary, the hidden and the faked, the irrational in men. You will live in a world of responsible beings who will be consistent and reliable as facts. The guarantee of the character will be a system of existence where objective reality is the standard of the judge. Your virtue will be given protection. Your vices and weaknesses will not. Every chance will be open to your good, and none will be provided for your evil. What you'll receive from men will not be alms or pity or mercy or forgiveness of sins, but in a single value, justice. And when you will look at the men, at yourself, you will feel not disgust, suspicion, and guilt, but a single constant respect. Such is the future you are capable of winning. It requires a struggle. So does any human value. All life is purposefully strong. And your only choice is the choice of a goal. Do you wish to continue the battle of your present, or do you wish to fight for my world? Do you wish to continue the struggle that consists of clinging to precarious ledges in a sliding descent to the abyss? A struggle where the hardships you endure are irreversible and the victories you win bring you closer to destruction? Or do you wish to take a struggle that consists of rising from ledge to ledge in a steady ascent to the top? A struggle where the hardships are investments in your future, and the victories bring you irreversibly closer to the world of your moral idea. And should you die without reaching the full sunlight, you will die on a level touched by its rays. Such is the choice before you. Let your mind and your love of existence decide. The last of my words will be addressed to those heroes who might still be hidden in the world. Those who are held prisoner, not by their evasions, but by their virtues and their desperate courage. My brothers in spirit, check on your virtues and on the nature of the enemies you're serving. Your destroyers hold you by means of your endurance, your generosity, your innocence, your love, the endurance that carries their burdens, the generosity that responds to their cries of despair, the innocence that is unable to conceive of their evil and gives them the benefit of every doubt. Refusing to condemn them without misunderstanding and incapable of understanding such motives as theirs. We love your love of life, which makes you believe that they are men and that they love it. But the world of today is the world they wanted. Life is the object of their hatred. Leave them to the death they worship. Don't exhaust the greatness of your soul on achieving the triumph of the evil of theirs. Do you hear me, my love? In the name of the best within you, do not sacrifice this world to those who are its worst. in the name of the values that keep you alive. Do not let your vision of man be distorted by the ugly, the cowardly, the mindless, and those who have never achieved his title. Do not lose your knowledge that man's proper estate is an upright posture, an introscient mind, and a step that travels unlimited roads. Do not let your fire go out, spark by irreplaceable spark in the hopeless swamps of the approximate not quite, but not yet, the not at all. Do not let the hero in your soul perish in lonely frustration for the life you deserve but never have been able to reach. Check your road in the nature of your battle. The world you desire can be won. It exists. It is real. It is possible. It's yours. But to win it requires your total dedication and a total break within the world of your past, with its doctrine that man is a sacrificial animal who exists from the pleasure of others. Fight for the value of your person. Fight for the virtue of your pride. Fight for the essence of that which is man. Your sovereign, rational mind. Fight with the radiant certainty and the absolute rectitude of knowing that yours is the morality of life, and that yours is the battle for any achievement, any value, any grandeur, any goodness, and any joy that has ever existed on this earth. You will win when you are ready to pronounce the oath I have taken at the start of my battle. For those who wish to know, the day of my return shall now repeat it to the hearing of the world. I swear by my life and my love of it that I will never live for the sake of another man, nor ask another man to live for mine.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Send an email or visit us on social media to let us know what you think about this topic. And please remember to leave a 5-star rate and review.
Hey, did you learn something? Did you laugh? Supporting me is a way for you to be a part of the Abercast and ensure its growth and sustainability. It also means I can create a normal schedule for shows and bonus shows, as well as the exclusive Fellowcraft episodes. By supporting the show, you are not only a listener, but you are a part of the show. You supporting the show gives me a way to offer fun rewards as a thank you for showing your appreciation and support for our projects. Do you have an idea for a reward that you don't see? Let me know. My supporters are my partners. I currently pay for you to listen to the Abercast. Not only do I pay the hosting bills out of my own pocket, I volunteer my time and talent to each and every episode of the Abercast. The price of books, the time and resources of reading and researching, the massive amounts of gin and tonic needed, the equipment it takes to record the shows, the time and resources it takes to create the bonus material, and the cost to maintain the internet presence. Is it worth your support? I don't know. I'm proud of the Abercast, and I feel like I'm improving all the time. In addition to creating the show that you dig and that you are excited about, I also have a full-time commitment and other obligations. So why financial support? All of the supporters help me focus my time on the quality and development of the podcast. And what if you can't afford, $1 or $3 or $10 or whatever a month? Believe me, I get that. There are many degrees of support, but if you can't support the show financially, please consider leaving a 5-star rate and review on your preferred podcast app. And don't forget that you could sign into the mailing list and still unlock a lot of bonus content. Thank you. I cannot put into words how much it means to me that you listen to the show each time I post a new episode. Your feedback support and love of the stories that we talk about here is what keeps me going.